this is Bartek Skorupa for AETUTS Plus. In this video, I would like to present you three plugins that I call Compositing Bundle. Those are three pixel bender plugins that will allow you to use some interesting technique, interesting approach to compositing. At first, I will simply present them, I will show you the parameters and what you can do with them, and then I will show you some real-life scenario. The only thing you will need to do in order to be able to use those plugins is to download them and place them in the After Effects plugins folder. Okay, so let's get started with the first plugin that is called Smart Set Matte. This is the first plugin that I have ever written, and the reason was that I didn't like the behavior of the standard set matte effect that ships with After Effects. Let's take a look at the set matte effect. Here is a composition, and we have the solid. The values of this solid, as you can see, are like this. The blue channel's value exceed 1 substantially. The project is set to 32 bits per channel. The second one is called matte with alpha, and it looks like this. So as you can see, we have the alpha channel. And this layer, matte black and white, looks like this. And the alpha is set to 1 all over the picture. So let's use the set matte effect on this solid. Nothing changed, we left everything at the default settings, but as you can see, the values here are different. The value of the blue channel has been clipped to 1. Standard set matte effect is not compatible with 32 bits. If we disable this effect, you see that this value is different, is way beyond 1, and if we enable this effect, it's clipped to 1. But okay, let's set the matte of this layer using the alpha channel of this layer. So we simply choose the matte with alpha, use its alpha channel as the source of the alpha of this layer, and here we have it. Or we can use this other layer that doesn't have the alpha channel, but if we use, for example, luminance of this one, we get what we want, except of course the clipped values. We have the option to invert the matte, or the option to composite this matte with the original matte. In this case, it doesn't make any difference because the original matte is 100% all over the picture, but we have this option. So this is the standard set matte effect. Let's disable it and apply my smart set matte. The first thing you will notice is that although the effect is applied, the values are not clipped. This plugin is 32 bits compatible. So now let's take the matte with alpha and use its alpha channel, and everything behaves nicely. Or we can use this other layer and choose its luminance. As you can see, we also have the other options. You can use alpha, luminance, lightness, or red, green, or blue channel. And you can invert the matte. But as you can see, we have two checkboxes for inverting the matte. This is for inverting the input matte. And the second one inverts the resulting matte. The matte that is the result of mixing the input matte with the current matte. Here in the standard set matte effect, you have the checkbox composite matte with original. In my plugin, I have replaced the checkbox with a pop-up, which is by default set to multiply. And this is exactly the same as this checkbox checked on, because what it really does, it simply takes the input matte and multiplies it by the current matte. If we don't want to composite the input matte over the current matte, we simply choose none here. But I have also included some other options of mixing this input matte with the current one. And there is another option that is not included in the standard set matte effect. We can adjust this matte here inside the effect. So we can, for example, increase the contrast, lower the brightness, and you see that it affects the resulting matte. You can also change the opacity of the input matte. And here we have the several options of the display. So now we are looking at the result. We can also see how the image looked like before the matte was applied. We can see how the matte looked like before this effect was applied. We can take a look at the input image. Input matte. Input matte after those corrections has been made. New matte. But of course we are interested in the result. Okay, can we achieve this without this effect? Of course we can. Let's simply do it. Let's disable the effects applied to this layer, duplicate this one for example and place it above this one. Now let's set the track matte of this layer to Luma matte, and we can apply brightness and contrast effect to this one. Increase the contrast, lower the brightness, and you get the same. But if you would, for example, want to use this layer as the source of the matte for many layers like this, you may end up with many duplicated layers, and it's becoming messy, and some people want to keep the number of layers as low as possible. So this is not a kind of must-have effect, but it may be helpful in some cases. The other effect that I wanted to show you is mix layer. It is a combination of compound arithmetics and color correction tool, but it needs a little introduction. Here we have a composition. I have placed 5 layers here, and those are the render passes that come from 3D application. So this is the color pass, and I would like to multiply it by something like this, that I call 2Diffuse. So I set the blending mode to multiply. Then I would like to multiply the result by ambient occlusion, add specular to this, and add reflections. But I would like to use only 50% of this. So this is the standard approach when mixing the layers. But let's now mix those layers a little bit differently. Let's disable their visibility and add just a black solid and use compound arithmetics. So we take the color pass. Now let's duplicate this effect. Take the 2Diffuse pass with the multiply blending mode. Duplicate it. Take ambient occlusion with the multiply blending mode, duplicate, specular, add, duplicate, reflect, add, but we would like to use only 50% of this. So we achieved almost exactly the same, but the problem is that compound arithmetic is not 32 bits per channel compatible, so we lost all of the values that exceed 1. Let's take a look at the difference. So for example, here in this area, you see the values, they have been clipped to 1, and in this setup, they are not clipped to 1. So let's now recreate this setup, but instead of using compound arithmetic, I will use mix layer. The first thing you will notice is that it has many other parameters that we can adjust, but let's forget about them at the moment. I will get back to them later. I will now simply mix the layers. So I take the color, duplicate the effect, take the 2Diffuse with the multiply blending mode, duplicate, ambient occlusion with the multiply blending mode, duplicate, specular with the add blending mode, duplicate, reflect with the add blending mode with the opacity of 50%. And now we are much closer, as you can see. The values haven't been clipped to 1. Mix layer effect is 32 bits per channel compatible. Okay, let's delete all of the instances of compound arithmetic and rename the effects so that we know what they are doing. This will be times 2Diffuse. And let's go a little bit further. Okay, what are all those controls? You can simply adjust the input layer before it's mixed. You can make the primary color correction using just those 3 color pickers for gain, gamma and lift. The gain influences the most the highlights, the gamma, the midtones, and lift, the shadows. If you know how the color correction systems like Apple Color or DaVinci or Colorista for After Effects work, you shouldn't have any problems with using those things. The way I like to work with those color pickers is so that I set the brightness as the main control instead of using the hue that is the standard. So I can adjust the brightness of the highlights, and here I simply pick the color, shadows, and pick the color, or gamma, like this. Let's reset them. And in order to better understand the behavior of this color correction, let's apply another instance of mix layer, and we will call it overall color correction, and turn this checkbox on. It's called self color correction, and if it's turned on, it will not mix any of the layers, but it will simply color correct the result. So again, let's adjust the gain, lift, and gamma. We also have 3 sliders for gain, gamma, lift, and they simply affect all of the 3 channels at once. Now let's take a look at this checkbox, Preserve Luma. This is for using a little bit different approach to color correction. Let's reset this effect, set self color correction, and enable Preserve Luma. If you use this one, you should first adjust the luminance using the sliders here, and then you adjust the colors. And as you can see, I changed the color of the gain, but the luminance doesn't change. So this is another approach. Let's reset this, self-color correction. Then we have those 3 controls, and they are for tinting the result. The amount to tint is normally set to 0, but we can increase it. Of course, we can change those colors. So this works exactly the same as a standard tint effect that ships with After Effects. Then if we want to, we can clip the output white. So all of the values that exceed 1 will be clipped to 1. And when we disable it, you see the difference. Here we adjust the strength of all of those adjustments. And here the opacity of the input layer. And the blending mode, of course. Okay, what other options we have? We can, for example, color correct only the certain area of the picture. Let's reset this effect, turn the self color correction on, and disable it for a moment. I have rendered the indexes of the certain objects from the 3D, so now I can use them as the alpha source. Let's take a look at something like this, for example. This is the index of the red parts of the lamp. Let's place it below everything, and let's disable the visibility of all of the layers except this black solid, and we can also make them shy, so we are left only with this one. So we would like to color correct only the parts defined by the index of the red parts of the lamp. So we will take the Smart Set Matte, select the source of the alpha, change it to luminance, and after that we apply the mix layer effect with the option of self color correction turned on, and here we have the checkbox use current matte for input. This will force the effect to make adjustments only on this area. So let's adjust gain, for example, and now we can bring back the rest of the image by enabling this checkbox, set full output matte. Or you can, for example, turn the self color correction off, choose some other layer, and the effect right now will use the current matte for mixing the input layer. You can set the full output matte on or off, choose the blending mode. So this is how it works. Let's delete this instance of mix layer effect and take a look at the last effect that I wanted to show you, and it's called mix color. This mix color works the same as mix layer, but instead of mixing the layer into the image, it mixes the solid color into the image. You can set full output matte and use some blending mode and set the opacity of this input solid. So let me now show you the full scenario where we have many elements, many render passes that come from 3D application that we want to mix together, composite together. I will first just briefly show you the standard approach to this, and then what difference those three little plugins can make. And I don't say that this second approach is better, it's simply different. So let's start with the first approach, the standard approach. And I will not go much into details. If you want, you can watch my tutorial about compositing Blender's render passes, where I explain step by step what I do, why I do it. Here we will be focusing on the structure of the project, on the differences when we use one approach or the other. So let's take a look at what we have. Those 5 layers are the render passes that I will mix together to get this. And this is something that I call base. And it looks as if it has no glass elements, no covers for the lamps, no windows, and so on. Then I have the render passes for the glass elements. So I have something like this, as well as something like this, or reflections. And those elements are combined, composited in those 2 compositions. And if they are properly mixed into the composite composition, they give me the final result like this. And this is the base for making final touches, like all of the vignettes, final color correction, grains, and so on. The other things that I have are some objects indexes that will serve me as the alpha data. Alpha for the body, alpha for the red parts of the lamps, alpha for windows, alpha for the whole car, and then I have something like this that I call Fresnel. So this will serve me as the alpha data for creating the Fresnel effect. And I have separate such pass for the base and separate for the glass. So let's take a look at the composition base. I have used only the footage that I showed you. There is nothing more. So those images are composited using a certain blending modes. Some of them have some effects applied to them. So this, for example, allows me to change the color of the car paint and the proper order of the layers, proper effects applied to the layers and proper blending modes, some track mattes and so on allow me to get this. In some cases I had to use some pre-compositions. This composition is just for the reflect pass. And if we open it, we see that it's becoming even more complicated. This layer, for example, is used as a matte for this layer. And if we open it, we get something like that. Glass diffuse looks like this. And it's pre-composed. So, layers, 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 and more layers. This one. This is just for the reflections on the glass parts. And here we get even more layers. So this is how it's done. I am always doing my best to keep the things organized properly. So I have the folders in the project panel for the compositions, for the footage, and so on. So when I have the presentation and I have the client behind my back, I can easily find things so that if the client has some request, I can respond quickly. I can show him how it would look like if I change something. Let's say that he says, what about making this car white? This is not a big deal for me because I know that I have the layer that is responsible for the car paint color, and I simply go to the proper composition, select this layer, and I will change the color of the car. I will set it to be white. Why not? But then I notice that it doesn't look exactly as I expected. So I will also have to adjust some other layers just to make it work. So for example, this to diffuse pass, I would like to change it just a little to make it work better with the white color. But I would like to change only the parts that are covered with the car paint. So maybe I should get the alpha data of the body, place it above this layer, set the track matte of this one to Luma matte. But now I lost all of the rest of the to diffuse pass. So I will maybe duplicate those layers, and here I will change the track matte from Luma matte to Luma inverted, and now I can adjust this one. So let's maybe apply the levels to it and try to adjust this. Okay, let's take a look at the final composition. So I am not 100% sure if it works, so maybe for the white car paint some other setup of the reflections would work better. So let's open the composition for the reflect pass and let's try to adjust this. Let's open the composite composition, lock it, and then go into this composition and try to do something about it. So here maybe we should tint it a little. to map the white to some color, like maybe this, I don't know, maybe not that much. Okay, so this is how it looks like. And I asked the client, do you like it? And he says, well, it's okay, but could you just show me the previous version and the current version? Like, I would like to see before and after, before and after. Whoops, I don't remember what changes I made. I added some layers. So I could try to undo, and maybe I will succeed, but I'm not sure. Well, I am at least that lucky that before I made all those changes, I saved the project. So now I can save it under the different name and reopen the previous version and then show it to the client. But then he will ask me, okay, so show me after. So what I do? Close the project and reopen this one and so on and so on. So this may be really painful. And I made the changes not only in the base composition, in the final composition, but I made the changes in pre-compositions. So let's say that I knew that the client will want to come back to the current version. So I could duplicate this composition, but it would not help at all because all of the changes made in pre-compositions will affect this composition and its copy. So I could use the script that I found that is called True Comp Duplicator, which allows me to duplicate the composition together with the pre-compositions, but it will give me more mess here in the project panel. I can end up with hundreds of compositions, pre-compositions and pre-compositions of the pre-compositions and so on and so on. So maybe there is another way. And yes, there is. So now let me show you what those three little plugins really can do. We can simply change this setup, this project, into this. And I am not talking about the final result, about the looks. The change that we are looking at can be seen here in the project panel. We have only one composition and just the folder with the footage and nothing more. And in this composition, we have just one layer visible, and all of the compositing is done here on this layer by applying those effects in combination with some other effects like simple choker. And this layer and those effects use the layers that are currently shied and their visibility is disabled. So we don't have to see them, we can shide them. And now the client asks me to make this car white, so I can simply change the name of this layer to blue, let's say, duplicate it, change the name of the other one to white, disable the blue one, and make changes here. So I know that in order to change the color of this car, I have to mix the color here. Let's call this effect car paint color. But before I have to set the matte for this color. So I take the smart set matte, rename this instance to matte car paint, take the alpha body and its luminance, and after mixing the car paint color, we have to, of course, set the full output matte. And we set this color to whatever we like. So if we disable both of those effects, we get the previous version. When we enable them, we have another color of the car paint. But as before, it needs to be tweaked just a little. So simply adding some more instances of those effects to the stock here will allow us to do it, like change the to diffuse pass using the same matte that we used to mix this car paint color. So in this case, I will not set the full output matte because I will use the same matte for the changes in the to diffuse pass and make all of the changes that I made in the previous version, in the previous setup, but instead of using the layers, I simply use the effects applied to one single layer. This technique is not easy at first. It requires getting used to it. It requires some practice, but simply give it a try. Take a look at the project here. Nothing changed. We still have only one composition and we still only have the footage and nothing more. The only thing that changed is one additional layer added to this composition. Now we can take a look. Okay, this is blue and this is white. This is blue. This is white. So let's maybe create more versions. Why not? So now we have this version, white version, black version, brown version, whatever you like. I have purposely pushed those setups, those examples to their extremes. So in the first setup, I didn't use those effects at all. And in the second setup, I used almost only those effects, adding only the simple choker. But this is rather obvious that in real life, you will use something in between. The project files include both setups, this one and this previous one, so that you will be able to analyze this and see how it works. Oh, and one little tip. When I use this one, this extreme setup, I tend to rename the effects. So for example, this one is called Matt Frasnell Bass, but I would like to know what is the name, what is the original name of the effect. So I can always hit about here and it will tell me what the effect is. Simple choker. I didn't change this name, but I always can hit about and I see that this is the simple choker effect. This one is mix layer effect. So this is the tip. Now, if we decide to use this approach, this technique, but not only in this case, you have to know what you want to do. So the steps should be as follows. I have to know what I want to mix into the image and what alpha, what matte should I use to mix this. So first I set the matte, the alpha, then I mix the color or mix the layer using this alpha. Here, for example, I set the matte for the car paint color, and then if I want to use the same matte to mix something else into it, I don't set the full output matte. I set the full output matte in the last effect that uses this matte. So this is how it works. I hope you find it useful. Just have those effects in your toolset. In my opinion, they can do a lot. Of course, they cannot do everything. The tools included into mix layer effect to color correct the things have some limitations. It's obvious. So sometimes it's not enough. But please just try them. Share your thoughts. Improve them if you like. Those are Pixel Bender plugins. So if you know how to deal with Pixel Bender, you can change those plugins. So that's all from me. Bartek Skorupa, thank you very much. Take care. Bye bye.